Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Securing Hybrid Active Directory, End-to-End Full Lifecycle Security. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mandy Sadowski, Head of Marketing at Cayosoft. Two of the speakers joining me today are Bob Bobel and Derek Melber. Bob has spent almost 2 decades in Active Directory and Microsoft Identity Management. In 2013, he and a colleague founded Cayosoft to help deliver management and protection solutions for modern Microsoft environments, which are mostly hybrid. And Derek is a longtime Active Directory expert, 16-time MVP, and he is the technical director of Alsid in North America. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. 16 times, Derek. Holy smokes.
Yeah, 60.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I know.
Congratulations.
I know. You don't know how much that costs to do that, too.
Okay.
Well, because you guys are here today, because you all are here today, you probably already know that securing Active Directory is not easy. Every day we hear about another malware attack, plus most IT teams fight daily to avoid internal breaches, whether they're malicious or a mistake. These things happen because it's exceptionally hard to completely secure the AD environment, and native tools simply are not enough. And of course, securing AD is never ending. We hear about new exploits all the time, so this is an ongoing process rather than a one-time event. And this is why Cayosoft and Alsid have teamed up to help provide a more complete AD security solution. Today, we're going to cover end-to-end lifecycle security. This includes overcoming native permission limitations. This can be done by implementing least privilege management, which is a must-do to help limit who could compromise your environment. We also discuss proactively identifying attack pathways by looking at AD and how it is configured, but comparing those pathways to known attacks and letting you know before any compromise if you may indeed be vulnerable. The idea is to fix it before it becomes a problem. So I won't walk through each bullet here with you, but think about all the tactics you already may be taking to secure your Active Directory, and we'll talk about these in more detail with that today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to one additional speaker that's joining us today, Sylvain Cortez. Sylvain is Alsid's resident evangelist and is involved in product management assignments at Alsid. He's recognized as a 15-time Microsoft MVP. He's an identity and access management and cybersecurity expert and works with large organizations to execute identity and directory governance projects. This is everything from authentication, cloud identity management, and much more. He's developed a deep expertise in AD bridge projects, integrating AD with various operating systems like Unix, Linux, and Mac OS. With that, Sylvain, over to you.
So thank you, Mandy, for the introduction. And here is what we consider as a global AD security plan. So you need to cover 4 major steps to be able to struggle against attackers and malwares which target AD to wider spread inside your organization. Step 1 is very simple to understand. Step 1 is about taking a security picture of your AD weaknesses. It is very important to understand what are your main risks to fix it. Step 2. Step 2 is as well really important because you need to keep your security picture updated in real time. And here, real time is crucial when we are talking about AD security. If a new misconfiguration appears in your AD environment, you will have between, let's say, 2 and 4 hours to react in order to fix the situation before a malware uses it. So in a nutshell, we can say that performing pen test, performing audits is a good practices, but it is not really useful from a blue team perspective. Step 3. Step 3 for sure is more on the reactive side of this AD security plan. It's about detecting specific AD attacks. Again, here I'm not talking about, collecting millions of DC logs every day. This is not really useful, as you can imagine. I'm talking about being able to detect any AD attacks before and after domain dominance. Remember, some attacks don't create any DC logs and are invisible from classic forensic. Last step, step 4, catch the important AD changes to be able to perform a security forensic. That's the final step. The idea here is to focus on what is important and to be able to make the link between an AD attack and some AD changes. For example, you will need to link a golden ticket and what was doing under this golden ticket during the attack. So you need to take care about these 4 steps. And now let's have Derek and Bob explaining everything using real demonstration.
Thank you, Sylvain. What I want to do is really give everyone a view into how Alsid functions, as well as how it's going to help you fix security issues that are in your Active Directory environment. If we start here within the dashboards, really the dashboards give you a view into what is going on within your Active Directory environment. The way that I like to organize my dashboards is, first of all, organize them based on different areas. So privileged accounts, attack pathways, password issues, so I can really see where I need to spend the time within Active Directory performing fixes. I also like to view kind of an overall view of kind of where things are within Active Directory. So this is kind of a general view on the overall state of my AD security. Now, the way that Alsid works is a little bit different than most other AD solutions. The way that Alsid works is when it points to an Active Directory environment, it pulls in the Active Directory database and it pulls in sysvol so that our security engine can perform an analysis on the security relationships between objects, attributes, security ACLs, both in Active Directory and in sysvol, and it looks for attack pathways. So one of the main differentiators for what Alsid provides is it looks at your existing Active Directory infrastructure instead of just looking from the point it's installed forward. So it's going in and pulling out those things for you. Now, this is a game changer because many organizations have legacy settings that are really causing issues and allowing attackers to easily gain access within your Active Directory environment. So being able to see these becomes very important. Now, as soon as Alsid organizes the relationships and uncovers the attack pathways, with a single click, you're able to see what the actual misconfigurations are within Active Directory. So for example, let's look at Kerberos delegations. Now, Kerberos delegations are certainly one of the areas that I find every Active Directory environment has an issue with, because everyone needs Kerberos delegations. But unfortunately, we haven't looked at some of them in a long time, and we haven't really gone in and secured them. Now, what you'll notice is that Alsid gives you the details around what the vulnerability is, as well as any recommendations that you would take to fix the misconfigurations. But of course, ideally, what you want to see is the details, and that's where you're going to look at the deviant objects. Now, here you can see that I have a couple of computers, as well as quite a few users that have Kerberos delegations that are an issue. If you were to click on one of these, you'll be able to see the full details around what Alsid has found to be the issue. Now, you'll notice here that this has unconstrained Kerberos delegations, which of course is the worst of all computer Kerberos delegations. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that Alsid is giving you these details so that you know exactly what you're going to see within the Active Directory configurations and what you need to do to fix them. Because if you were to go to the internet right now and search, how do I fix unconstrained Kerberos delegations for computers, it's probably going to tell you to just constrain it. But that's really not far enough. And what you'll notice is this other computer here does have constrained delegations, but it's using protocol transition, which is not as secure as we need to be. So this really gives you that depth of what you need to do to fix your environment. Now, one of the things that you can do, and what we highly recommend, is as soon as you find something with an Alsid, you take our recommendations and you can now jump into the Active Directory environment. You can find the actual computers or whatever the object is that has the issue, and you can fix them. Now, this is immediately going to clean up these attack pathways, and it's going to solve the issue of Kerberos delegations for these computers. Now, Alsid is in real time, so if we jump back in, you'll see that those two computers now have actually been cleaned up. So this is the initial goal, as Sylvain was talking about. Pillar number one is the ability to see the misconfigurations and have the ability to clean them up before the attacker can come in and enumerate your environment. So this allows you to do the cleanup of the existing environment, those legacy settings that you haven't really looked at in a long time, maybe since the early 2000s, but they really need to be cleaned up because the attackers are using these enumeration tools to dig in, find these issues, and then leverage them. But this is only step one. What about step two? Well, step two really is the concept that things are going to continually change within Active Directory. And since things are constantly changing with Active Directory, we need to have something that is giving you real-time views into the existing Active Directory structure as well as the changes. So any modifications need to be analyzed and alerted if it does open up an attack pathway. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're working on a project to clean up your privileged groups, and you come into domain admins and you find that Adam is here and Adam shouldn't be here. So you're going to go remove Adam from domain admins because, well, that's a good thing to do. But not everything is as it appears. And when we remove Adam, you'll notice that Alsid in real time analyzes that change and notices there's a new attack pathway. So in this particular case, even though removing Adam out of a privileged group was a good thing, in this particular case, Adam had an attribute configured in such a way that it actually opened up a different attack pathway. So this is that real-time capability, that dynamic aspect of what Alsid is providing, giving you a clear view into the overall security of AD. But this is just looking at the proactive nature of security within Active Directory. What about that reactive nature that Sylvain was talking about? Well, Alsid can look for brute force attacks and even password spray attacks for some of the most common things that are attacking Active Directory. Now, these don't rely on any misconfiguration whatsoever. These are just users in your environment that are launching these attacks against the environment. Ideally, what you want to do is notice them in real time and shut them down. And that's really where Alsid comes in. But Alsid can look at even more lethal types of attacks, like DC sync and DC shadow attacks. Let me show you how Alsid works with a DC shadow attack, being able to see it in real time. So over here, I have the environment set up where I'm actually going to launch a DC shadow attack. So I have the different environment areas set up, and I have Mimikatz running, which of course is how you launch a DC shadow attack. And I've logged in with the correct credentials so that I can go in and I can modify an existing user's SID history by putting in the domain admin SID into their SID history so they immediately become a credentialed account. So over here, I'm going to initially launch the attack. And then over here, I'm actually going to push the change through the system. So this actually modified, and you see how quick it was. It modified the user's SID history, and you can see that right here. So you can see that I now modified the SID history for this user. Now, a DC shadow attack is very difficult to detect because it's actually using a fake domain controller, and it's the fake domain controller which would have logged the information. But since the fake domain controller isn't known by AD monitoring solutions or SIM solutions, they can't see it. But what you'll notice here is Alsid sees it in real time because we're actually looking at the replication stream. So we're able to pick this up and we can communicate this information into your SOC so that everyone is aware that this is an attack that is occurring, and you're able to now remediate this as soon as possible. One last thing that I want to mention about Alsid is the ability to actually go threat hunting, to dig deeper. And that's really where this trail flow comes in and the ability for you to search the history of what's been going on in Active Directory, and not only type in your own expressions, but you can then come over here and use the wizard, and you can clearly see that you can have very diverse types of searches that you can look back into the environment. So now you can do searches, let's say, on the history of what's going on, looking to make sure that you understand fully where things are going on within your Active Directory environment. So that gives you a view on how Alsid works. Now I'm going to kick this over to Bob so he can show you a little bit about the Cayosoft solution.
Great, thank you. Now that we saw that really great demonstration of the Alsid solution, let's talk a little bit about Cayosoft. While you saw the really cool real-time ability for Alsid to secure Active Directory, you still have to provide permissions or delegate the ability to perform tasks to administrator that keep them from making mistakes or making malicious changes. And so Cayosoft provides a management and protection layer for administrators so that you, as the directory services owner, can provide delegation that is both secure and then have a fallback to reverse changes that might have been made in error. Once you've rolled those changes back, there's another option then to implement additional roles and rules to prevent those mistakes or malicious changes from being made in the future. We do that through two different components to the Cayosoft solution. On the management side, we have Cayosoft Administrator. That's the product name itself, but really the underlying architecture is probably more important. You can think of Cayosoft Administrator as sort of a firewall around Active Directory to protect Active Directory from day-to-day administrators, help desk folks, and end users. There is a special architecture we use called a three-tier architecture, where the actual end users making changes don't have any native permissions in the directory. They only have role-based delegation that is a least privilege model through our solution. So when they go to perform a task, they are not actually performing the task directly. They perform the task and submit it to the service. The service then makes sure through an access check and a rules check that they've performed the task correctly and that they were allowed to perform the role. Once those checks have been passed, then it passes that change into the directory. On the protection side, we have a solution that is continuously monitoring your directories for change and can find directory changes that are not necessarily logged by the event logs. And for both of these solutions, we use a technology we call true hybrid. And what we mean by that is that we do both management and protection for both your on-premise directories, for your hybrid directories, and for your cloud directories. These are all Microsoft, by the way. We are introducing Google later on in 2021, but that won't come online until probably the latter half. So on the management side, we use rules and roles to control administration and provide better security and a true least privilege model. And on the protection side, we're backing up, monitoring and backing up all changes that we detect, and then you can roll those changes back down to the attribute level. So I'd like to jump over and actually show you the solutions in action so that you're not just looking at a PowerPoint slide. So here I've jumped over to the web portal. And remember, I mentioned we do both Active Directory management and Azure Active Directory management, as well as Office 365, now known as Microsoft 365. So I've logged into this dashboard with a full administrator account so I can see and do anything. And along the left-hand side, the first thing I'll point your attention to is the Active Directory section. Now, in the native tools, you had these things called organizational units, OUs, and you would manage by those. Those do not necessarily exist in Azure Active Directory, so we invented a new paradigm that allows you to basically have the best of both worlds. You can have something that renders an OU on-premise in traditional Active Directory, or renders groupings or administrative groups in the cloud where there are no OUs. And yes, we do support native admin units as well. So these things are called admin units. And when I open them up, I basically have a scope. In this case, it's full Active Directory. I come on down and I pick a particular object class, and I can do a search, and then I see the objects within that particular scope. Now, that isn't necessarily useful if you want to implement least privilege. So the first part of least privilege is to narrow the scope down, right? So that you don't have all those additional objects out there, like some of these are Exchange on-premise objects. I don't want help desk or day-to-day administrators monkeying around with those. So this is where these admin units become very important to us. I can scope them directly to an OU. So here I have a sub-OU called Columbus, and within Columbus I have users and groups and contacts, the traditional things. And here I'll click search, and you'll see that now I'm only looking at folks that are in the Columbus OU. And because we're managing against Active Directory, we can take advantage of things like ANR search, which is a built-in, very fast search for Active Directory. You'll see things come back very quickly. I can select and manage just like I would a normal Active Directory management tool, any number of which are out there from various vendors that are, have been around for the past 15, 20 years. But here's where we go beyond just legacy. The roles and rules we have, you're actually seeing me work on Active Directory. And now on the right, once I've selected a user, I have all these different commands that I can execute. So for example, I can go see what license they have in Microsoft Cloud. Seems like a pretty simple request, but you have to realize I'm looking at the Active Directory user. We're mapping those and then looking up the appropriate user in the Azure Active Directory and then pulling the license and showing it on the screen. We also do things like monitor license amounts. And in this case, I have a license quota assigned as well. So we go way beyond just traditional AD management. We can also basically create virtual domains, if you want to think of it that way. Like Columbus could be scoped down and you could only work within Columbus. That's great, especially if you're delegating out to different department level or OU level admins. And on the Office 365 or the Azure AD side, we can almost make mini tenants, if you want to think of it that way. That's how constrained we can get this scope of administration. Now, this case, that was a simple hybrid operation, but maybe I don't want to give all these different commands to an administrator. That could potentially be an issue, right? There's too much for the particular help desk person to have access to here. And so I'm going to just jump over to another web browser. And I've now logged in as a different user. This one is logged in as Jimmy, who is a help desk user. And you'll see the view is much, much different. We still allow Jimmy to see some dashboards. That's just some general analytics information that we provide so that Jimmy can see, for example, the scopes that Jimmy's been delegated over. Here I have, for example, Columbus. You'll see that I don't have computers and I'm missing some of the others, but I can still look at users and I can still do the same types of searches I did before. So for example, if I see Albert here, great, there's Albert Einstein. That's the one I used earlier to look at the license information. And what you'll see here is that we have a different type of admin unit, one which is not based on an organizational unit in Active Directory, native Active Directory, but based on a query. So here I'm just going to cut across all my OUs, could be different locations, Columbus, London, New York. And when I do a search here, I find anybody who happens to be in engineering, and you'll see the first 20 users that show up happen to be Atlanta, but I know Albert Einstein was in Columbus. So we have the ability to set these scopes. And you'll also notice that I'm looking at, in addition to Active Directory objects, these admin units can also contain hybrid objects. So here's Teams and Office 365 groups. So we give you one set of roles, one set of rules to implement least privilege and control over your admins. And it also expands beyond just your forests to your tenants as well. So now I have a single security model, a single control plane that allows me to have an identity control plane across to both my legacy directory and my Azure Active Directory. So now I'm going to jump back. Now returned to being logged in as full administrator. And I want to point something out that is a real possibility for people. So if I search, for example, engineering, I have a little alert down here to inform me something has changed that I was asking to monitor. So I'll go ahead and search my users in engineering. And I'm going to pick the first user here, and you'll see that I have a delete command. I'm going to go ahead and delete that user. That user has now been deleted from Active Directory. So I have this alert in Teams, so I'll jump over to Teams very quickly and see what it's telling me. And what it's telling me is that, there it is, that a member was added to an Azure AD role called Global Administrators. We have the ability through our solution to set up notifications for things you might find important. The CEO's account, if it's being modified, let us know that some attribute's been changed, or specific group memberships. Anything that you're interested in watching, you can actually have an alert created and then either provided by Teams or email to let you know what's going on. And then I can simply click to get more detail. What we're actually doing, however, is using the second part, the protection part of the product, to watch for specific changes. This is where we're continuously monitoring for change, whether that's changes to group memberships or to attributes, and we give you a nice complete list of those changes. So as you're looking across your directories, whether they're in the cloud or online, or sorry, on premise, you're going to be able to see those native changes being made outside of our tool. That's the management tool. But this includes those items that were performed by the management tool itself. So here's Alice Mann. They were removed from a group. That's part of it. If I come down here a little bit further, you can see where they actually deleted Alice Mann. And I can actually look at details here. So I can see what the old values were, the values that were changed during the deletion, etc. And you'll see in both cases, I have a restore button. And the cool part about this is Alice was actually synchronized to the cloud. So when I say yes, this actually starts my restore on premise, rolls back those changes on both the cloud side and on the on-premise Active Directory side. And then if needed, it'll run synchronization. And eventually you'll see, I get a little note here that I have additional changes to bring in, and it will eventually show me where I've undeleted Allison Mann. And now I also mentioned earlier that we had that notification in Teams about that person being added to the group. So the cool part about this Teams integration is that if I click, it brings me straight to the particular change I'm interested in, one that I have said I wanted to monitor for. And here it was, Albert Einstein was added as a member to this role. And now I can just simply click restore and roll back that membership. So this gives me a very fast way to look for specific changes that I'm interested in, and then have a complete capability to search for, isolate, and then remediate any changes that I disagree with, meaning they're suspect changes, either a mistake or a malicious change. Once I've recovered, for example, a deleted object, then I can come back, and if I just jump over to my delegated administrator, I can actually remove the delete command. So here over Columbus, I see that as I come down this list, Jimmy is able to delete Columbus users, but I got smart on engineering and removed the delete command. So I removed that from a delegated command to make sure that they couldn't perform that task. So that was my demonstration. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mandy.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for the demonstration. Thanks, Derek, for the demonstration. I failed to mention earlier, just a reminder, I see some of you have already figured it out. Please drop your questions in the question queue. You'll see it where it says questions. Don't use the chat, that's not the place for it. But go ahead and drop your questions. Derek, Bob, Sylvan, while we have a minute, there are a few questions. I'm just gonna go ahead and fire away if you guys are good with that.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Cool. This question, maybe it's you, Derek, but I think this might be a Sylvan question. Based on your experience of deploying Alsid, what misconfigurations in AD do you find most often, or should we be watching for?
Thanks, Mandy. That's a good question. I would say for sure it will depend about what kind of organization, I mean, which vertical, which size. But we saw some misconfigurations which were, I mean, like on every company. And I would say clear text password, both in script and in some AD attributes. It seems weird, but we have a lot of clear text password, especially when you're thinking about service accounts. Let's say 20 years ago, we were used to do some bad things, and we put the password inside the description attribute. What about we have also some again very old service account where we can find no password required. And again, it depends if your AD is old or not. And finally, I would say trust relationships that were forgotten. That's a classic thing. And we even saw in large companies when they install Alsid, they just discover new forest and new trust relationship. I would say that's the main ones.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for that. Bob, this one looks like it's for you. How difficult is it to switch from an older AD management solution to Cayosoft? The person who's asking this said, we have had the same solution for 10 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It still surprises me how many people are still trying to rely on native tools as well. So the deployment of both of the components, the management and the protection piece, are very, very fast, and maybe 5 minutes each at the most. But obviously then it's the configuration. So trying to design your administrative scopes, typically people just pick up their OUs and start managing right away. So that's a pretty fast process. If you're using some of the older, maybe more established tools, we may have migration assistance for those. So for example, if you're using Quest or Imanami or Managed Engine, sorry, Derek, we have some help we can provide on getting those some of those settings migrated. So that speeds it up even faster. But all in all, most deployments are less than a day to get both of those solutions up and running and get you started, on a least privilege model, and then also protecting your directories.
Excellent. One more that we have here, Derek, it's funny how it worked out. I think it's for you. It's talking about the demo. So it says, you mentioned that Alsid does not require an agent. How is that possible from your demo?
So this is probably one of the most common questions that I get, because everyone thinks, because of their experience, that security solutions require either an agent and or privileges, and it's just not the way it is. It's actually kind of one of the issues that Active Directory has. So many people have read access. So really the way that Alsid functions is we're able to tap into the PDC emulator's replication stream and pull the information from there. So it doesn't require an agent. Actually, nothing at all is installed on any domain controller. So not only not an agent, but no configurations need to be occurred at all. And then we have no privileges. So we do use a service account, but the service account is just a standard user. It's just in the domain users group. So the ability to tap into that replication stream really sets us apart. And we actually had a press release just this past week on the fact that our next version is going to be able to detect golden ticket attacks, and it's going to be able to do it without any privileges and without any agents, which is pretty miraculous at that as well. So that's the way we do it. It's in the magic sauce.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment on that as well, just because I think it's such a genius technology to utilize the way Alsid has done that. Back in the early 2000s, we were using that same process to look for administrative changes, but nothing nearly as cool as what you guys are doing, Derek. It's just fantastic. There's a lot of history for that solution, that particular feature out there. I'm just shocked that more security companies aren't using it. It's such a genius way to do it. So kudos to Alsid for that.
Yeah, it is. I agree, and it's actually, you made a little comment that you apologized to me for your comment on Manage Engine. I moved from Manage Engine to Alsid because of that. I mean, it really is a game changer, and I wanted to help, like I've done in my entire career, AD admins and organizations, and the ability to have such a light touch. And you're talking about install. I mean, there's no deployment, right? If you choose the SaaS model, there's actually no deployment. You just point to AD and boom, you're ready to go. So it really is a very slick way of doing things for sure.
Excellent. All right, guys. A couple other questions seem kind of repetitive. If you still have questions and you're typing them as we're wrapping up here, we will get to them with blogs or personal outreach. So don't be afraid to go ahead and add your question to the queue. With that, I would like to thank you, Sylvain. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Bob, for this presentation today. Really appreciate your time, and I hope that everyone found it valuable.
Thank you, Mandy. Thanks,
Yep,
guys.
thank you
Appreciate
so much. This was very, very useful, and hopefully everyone got some benefit out of it.
Thank
That's
you.
right. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.